There have been stories and rumours abound during the past couple days of essentially plots to oust Boris. And these become very, very interesting very, very quickly. And as I've said before, I think the autumn budget is where this could all kick off. Because, again, the Conservative Party has set it up to be party within a parties because, of course, traditionally we had the ERG, the European Research Group. Well, now there's more than that because you've got the Northern Research Group, there's the COVID Response and Recovery Group, there's the Cultural Group, there's all sorts of stuff. There's the MPs who back the Global Britain agenda. There's the GLOWs who back the Levelling Up agenda. There's the North MPs versus the Southern MPs. There are now just factions within the Tory party. And as we've been saying a lot, on the surface, it looks like that they are all marching in lockstep behind Boris. But that couldn't be further from the truth. And especially trying to recover from COVID, the ideas and the ideology of the Tory party is going to be completely against any form of spending or even trying to help out the economy, because it's been run by free market fundamentalists whose pretty much basic opinion is basic, well, if a company fails and there's 1,000 jobs lost here, a couple of hundred over there, 1,000 over there, then so be it. Because that's the market, that's how it should, quote, work. Again, like I said before, 2022 is going to be a very hard time for a whole lot of people. But, surprisingly, there are now interesting rumours that the guy who put Boris in power could very well be the one to dethrone him. So, before we do jump into that, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, as well as one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So, this comes from iNews. The title is Brexit Hardman Steve Barker helped put Boris in power and could help provide his undoing over net zero. Oh, sorry, not Steve Barker. I keep on saying it. Steve Baker, the self-professed hardman of Brexit, is gearing up for another tilt at the smug political elite who suffers what pain and when to meet climate change targets. Conservative MP for Wickham has already done more than most of the cabinet in shaping the destiny of this country. Without him and his band of Spartans, the 28 MPs who voted against all forms of Theresa May's agreement, Boris Johnson will have almost certainly wouldn't be sitting in Downing Street today. Mr. Baker is well aware of the debt, one of the reasons I made him, he always says at one point before checking himself. Helped make him Prime Minister was because I sat at dinner with him and saw in his eyes a very serious Boris Johnson. A Boris Johnson who really cares about the welfare of the British people. I don't know which Boris Johnson you were looking at, but yeah. A Boris Johnson that cares for the fate of the British people. I think COVID pretty much proves that wrong. Completely, 100% wrong. And bear in mind this. We've said this and mentioned this before. You look at other countries at the moment who have like COVID plans for like the next 3 to 5 years of like just recovery stuff. The UK's got nothing. Once furlough ends, that's it. There's no help or support. That's it. That's it. It's gone after that. You're on your own. And like I say, 2022 is going to be hard for a lot of people out there. Now, however, the Prime Minister is lumped in with Labour's Keir Starmer and the Liberal Democrats as part of the political class that is once again setting up the conditions for another populist revolt. We'll have another absolute political fiasco if we don't confront the cost of net zero now, he says. There is undoubtedly a political consensus that we should go to net zero, but As so often with this advancement of state power, the argument is not over whether something should be done, it's whether you're not going far enough and fast enough. But when those costs are actually present in people's lives, suddenly they'll be turning to Richard Trice or Lawrence Fox, leaders of the fringes parties of Reform UK and Reclaim, or whoever, and then we'll be reopening the rift of the UKIP phenomenon. It's important to be clear that what Baker is and is not saying is that he is now denying the science, but alarmist misinterpretations of it. He says that he does not deny that action is needed, but says politicians are not being honest about the scale of the pain to meet the targets that are being set. The trouble, he says, is that challenges to how the questions of reducing emissions are usually met with answers to why. Questions often go beyond the scientific consensus on likely scenarios. I'm absolutely clear that climate change is a real thing, and that human-emitted carbon dioxide is contributing to it, and that we should be doing something about it. The idea that we should do nothing is dangerous and foolish, he says before winding up to the but. I do not see how we get any government elected on an open and frank manifesto of making the public poorer and colder. The only way that this could be done is if the public genuinely believed that the earth was about to burn. And I think that is why we see the ICCP report being presented in a way that encourages people to be terrified. There are plenty of really good ideas out there. There are loads of really good ideas out there. We've talked about some of them before. One of them, for example, would be making the steel industry carbon neutral, which would only be possible if the government gives it serious backing. Not only would it protect jobs in the future, not only here in the north, but in Wales as well, in the steel industry, but it could open up entirely new areas of jobs when this funding comes in as well. So that's just one of the many options that are out there. And of course, again, he does not want to spend money on this, because of course it's going to cause problems for, shall we say, his back pocket, shall we say, eventually. He added, in net zero, as with Brexit, the political class has it in a very almost smug and self-satisfied way, built a consensus which is not going to survive contact with the public. And when there's actually going to be an enormous political explosion. There are ideas already out there. As with Brexit, it wasn't the fact that the political elite was being smug, it's the fact that people like you, Steve, lied to the people and exaggerated what the European Union was actually doing. You caused more harm. You are practically responsible for Brexit. And of course, when people come looking for who is responsible for damaging their lives because of Brexit, then they are going to look at you. So, contrary, however, to what you might expect, Mr. Baker is impeccably polite. He likes to point out his point for civility in public life, and he's usually straightforward about the role of his faith in the evangelical Christian in his politics, describing himself as a Christian libertarian. I'm absolutely not a Tory. His thoughtfulness on issues like, quote, willfulness, drawing a distinction between being considerate, good, and setting up new hierarchies of grievance, bad, he said that he would take the knee. He worries about food poverty again, but he voted for it numerous times, saying, I think it's outrageous that highly developed welfare states should need food banks. Yeah, because you voted for that highly developed welfare state to take away that welfare. And wants ministers to keep the £20 extra a week in universal credit given at the start of the pandemic, but is set for withdrawal this autumn. The reason is, as a Christian, I'm under command to, quote, to love my neighbour, to love even my enemies, to bless those who curse me. It's quite hard as a politician. My journey into Christianity was a sense impersonal, but all that relevant compared as to where we are. I'd been baptised into immersion of the Church of England, but was a beach and was unusual, he adds. I was 13 or 14. Like my parents, we were getting divorced. It was a very trivial time, and I responded to a sermon. The political conversion followed while he was working as a software engineer at Lehman Brothers, while he was working with a bank when it collapsed and triggered the financial global crisis. I was writing software. It definitely wasn't my fault. He's an admirer of Richard Colburn, a 19th century opponent of the Corn Laws, and the Austrian School of Economics, which makes him profoundly uneasy as what he sees as the reckless abandonment of sound money as central banks scramble to refloat the world economy after the crash. He thinks that the end of the quantitative easing will be very ugly, and I'm sorry to be a Cassandra. But as someone who believes the state should be as small as possible, he acknowledges the irony of having to help install Boris Johnson, a man who has presided over the biggest state since World War II, and was it worth it for Brexit, he says. So how has Mr. Johnson served his political purpose? I think he's going too far. I think that it's very much in his hands. So, very clearly there, we've talked about there is going to be a move against Boris Johnson sooner or later. And of course, the question will be, of course, will Johnson go or will he have to be pushed? That is, I think, definitely a question for another time. But that seems to be it. And already people are gearing up for a coming fight. If you've got a guy like that, who is, again, a very prominent backbencher, who has a lot of power within the party and can wield a lot of power, yeah, it's going to be... Autumn is going to be very interesting. Autumn is going to be very, very interesting indeed. So definitely stay tuned for that when that happens. And of course, to stay tuned, remember to hit the subscribe button. Of course, so remember to hit the bell button as well, so that you get notifications of when I do post a new video, and of course when I go live as well, because trust me, when Boris Johnson gets the boot, we will probably be doing a live stream as soon as we get word and following the events of what happens. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button on the way out. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.